everyone. I'm here again for another Freedom to Feel conversation. And, it really feels like that's exactly what I wanted to do with this platform, just to be here now and feel everything that life presents to me. I mean, everything. And I don't know if we can feel everything, how much of this we can really feel and perceive. But that's the whole idea. And it starts with me, of course, feeling my guests and what they say and how they say. The things that they say about freedom, what that is, and spiritual concepts and ideas. So I'm here with Ragini Michaels. I have interviewed her before. That was audio only. And then now we're here seeing each other and we'll have a conversation about one of her books that's titled, let me get here, The Jewels of Here and Now, All Reverence and Ever Deepening Gratitude. So I really love my guests introducing themselves for some reason. So I'll ask you the fundamental questions. You're already familiar with that. So who is Ragini Michaels in her own words, and what is the purpose of your work and message, Ragini?
Who is Ragini Michaels in my own words? Who Ragini Michaels is attempting to become is a purer channel for allowing that which animates me alive to come through and guide and direct the words and the sentiments that come out of my mouth. and and let's see, as far as the purpose of my work, is that what you asked? The purpose?
Yes.
The purpose of the actual work is to help people move more easily from stress and polarization to a place of equanimity. In other words, to help us more easily get back to the middle, to a balance point, and to learn how to navigate that and how to create it and maintain
Mm,
it. So that's what
mm.
the work is about. And it can be applied to almost any circumstance once you understand the steps that you need to practice to make it part of your brain and to get all this necessary required permission from your unconscious mind to actually come to the moment, because it doesn't like the moment much, the mind, and it can't really get there. So you kind of have to go to a place a little bit beyond your mind in order to find that equanimity, that balance. So my work is designed to help people who are interested in that discover how to do it and how to maintain it.
Wow. Yeah, I am familiar with that message, of course, in your work, and
Mhm.
and it's very attractive to me. And when you say uh, a place, something, it's almost like beyond the mind. But what is there beyond the mind, Ragini? How can we actually embody this understanding? Because it seems like right now I'm using the mind for everything, even to understand this and to
Mhm.
realize what you're saying, to be here now. But yeah, I would love to know a bit more about what is when you say going outside of the mind, beyond the mind, or a place that's not mind space. So where would that be?
More in the realm of consciousness as opposed to being conscious of something.
Mm,
It's more being consciousness itself. And the only way that I personally have ever gained tastes of that, or sometimes stayed long enough to have a short picnic
yeah.
and
Yeah.
somehow back in the
Wow.
normal world. I say it is beyond the mind because it's not a place, as I said earlier, where mind can go, because mind is a dualistic thing. It's always about this or that.
Yeah.
It's what makes life so hard sometimes is we're always being forced to make decisions,
Mm,
and the hard ones, when you have a challenge, the really hard ones are when you only have two choices. And that's the most stressful kind of decision making that we have. And the mind doesn't really have another way to deal with that other than to say it's either this or that.
wow.
So part of the way to help a person touch into, feel that space beyond mind, my work plays sort of a game with the mind,
Yeah.
and says, okay,
Yeah.
we're going to show you another way to do it. But
Yeah.
to touch into that, I think we all touch into that place beyond the mind. Like when you're sitting out under a tree on a beautiful
Mm,
day and you just relax and there's
yeah.
stillness and silence. You can touch, you can feel it. I mean, I think going beyond the mind is what gives you the real freedom to feel your life unfold
Mm,
in the moment with you
mm,
in it. But it's that paradox. I know the old
yeah.
analogy of sitting on the edge of the river instead of being in the river.
Right.
Let the river go by your life, but you sit on the edge and watch it. And my work is really about helping you understand that both happen at the same time.
Right.
So one happens for the mind body and the other happens for spirit or soul or whatever you want to call it. And for a lot of people, I just use the phrase whatever is animating you alive is what is beyond the mind.
I see. So it is, I mean, I say I see, but we can't see that. It's not something that we
No,
see, consciousness, right? Is this happening? It's here now and it's beyond duality, right? As you said beautifully. Hmm.
it's bigger than that. If you just think about if you could zoom out and see the moment in life that you're having, you would see that it's happening within the context of a larger picture,
Right.
a larger a larger sense of purpose and meaning that we can't
Mm,
really get with the mind. And this is why the spiritual path requires conviction, trust,
mm,
belief, and faith. It requires all four of those things
mm.
to really get to this place where you can open up enough to go, okay, maybe it is real, right? And let me just go to the bigger and go just imagine a zoom lens and here's my little life and my little story and I'm
Yeah.
all caught up in it and you take your attention. It's really about taking your attention off the story, all this drama happening in my life, and like a zoom lens and a camera you just go
Open. Yeah.
and you see, oh my gosh, another little story, another way that it's talked about is you're looking out of a little window in your bathroom. And if you go down to your living room and you look out at the same scene through your picture window, if you have one in your living room, it changes the way you relate to that experience. Okay.
Mm,
You have more information. You just have a bigger picture. And that expands your perspective, your range of possibilities that can be available to you because you start to see different angles. You start to see this little story
yeah.
from different perspectives. Oh, from up here, it looks like this. And from over here, it looks like that. And from down here, oh, I never thought about it that way before. Right.
Right. Right. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, a lot of sense to me. And I have done this for so long now. Even naturally, I used to, in difficult situations, try to see the big picture of it in a sense of being very positive. Uh, to the point of delusion, even kind of believe
Yeah.
certain situations to be good for me. Some
Mm-hmm.
difficult situations be happening because it was supposed to happen. I was supposed to be there, going through that, so I could grow somehow. But I also had the choice to leave the situation and be,
Mm-hmm.
let's say, and have it easier than I was having at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the difference between, because it has been my experience of trying to make everything meaning of everything and trying to make everything positive and good. So which is another polarity, obviously, is duality. So how do we know the difference between seeing the big picture, coming from intuition, coming from that place of knowing, of consciousness, or coming from belief systems that we have and fears that it's just so deep that they for some reason they become something positive. In my case, all my fears have turned into something, some sort of delusion of believing that everything can be okay and it's okay to suffer.
Yeah. Well,
I
you
know.
have such interesting questions, Valeria. It's a very interesting question, and it requires an ability to discriminate
Mm,
and to detach. You
yeah.
can't see clearly if you're attached to the
Mm,
scenario or to the fear or whatever. So the first thing is detaching. The second thing is being able to discriminate what is the learning that's here for you. That's our job, in my opinion, in a certain difficult circumstance like you're discussing. It's
Right.
my job to find the learning, the lesson, the clarity. And
Yeah.
I find for me that if I'm always looking for it to be positive, I am making a mistake, because
Ah,
life is both. And
mm,
anything good, any learning has to arise out of that bigger picture that sees life is both positive and negative. It's happy and sad.
right.
So to look for the learning from that perspective, whoops, sorry, that popped on my screen. If you can see it, I hope not.
No, I can't.
Um, okay, good. I'm sorry, I interrupted my thought. I'm trying to get it off my
It's
screen with
okay.
an update for things.
Mm,
Um, it's- so if I go into trying to make that discrimination, and what I'm saying is everything has to be positive, I'm going to have trouble, because here's the thing
mhm,
that's my experience.
yeah.
The things that I am discovering and seeing are the ugliest, most unpleasant, most unyucky things for me to see. And it's to see them because they are a part of the human phenomena.
Mm,
What I'm looking for in all my work is to what's the next level up, please, from
right.
the human experience, because it's soaked in opposites, and the only way we have to deal with it is to choose one and try to get rid of the other. And
Right.
that doesn't work, because then we're not able to see the bigger picture of
Right.
humanity. Human life is filled with pain and pleasure. Ultimately, that's the bottom
Mm,
line. As soon as we try to make that not true,
yeah.
we're in trouble, because
Ah,
that is the truth about the human experience.
mm,
If we can get to a place where we understand the paradoxical nature of being human, which is we're both always, and
right.
you can never get rid of one side of who you are, one, or even really an aspect of who you are, but you can become conscious of it, you can become aware of it, you can detach from it, and you can move your attention to a different perspective. And
Ah,
so I think, to
mm,
answer your question, it's always going to be a personal decision about whether you would stay or whether you would go. And
right.
of course, there's a time when I say to myself, when I've suffered so much and I can barely stand it anymore because there's just too much
Yeah.
suffering,
Yeah.
right? Then I say to myself, what is it that I am refusing to let go of, either inside me
Mm,
or the other? Or I
mm,
want the other person to give me something if it's a relationship, and I'm
right.
not getting it. And I'm suffering not because they aren't giving me what I want, but because I refuse to detach from wanting that. And of
Right.
course, to do that, you have to have someplace else to go. And that's where, I mean, to go to get your nourishment or whatever it is you think you need. And that means you have to have put in the time, like you do a lot, and like everybody listening probably does too,
Yeah.
meditation, contemplation, really being open,
Mm,
to something that you can't understand with your mind. But to come back to your topic, it gives you the freedom to feel the
mm,
spaciousness, the equanimity,
mm,
the presence that we
mm.
all want. Because for me, real presence, when I can connect with
Yeah.
it, I'm never thinking.
Yeah. Oh, you're never
That,
thinking.
that doesn't mean that words aren't coming out of my mouth,
Right.
but they're not coming from my mind. They're coming from
Uh,
some other dimension of
right.
me. And
Right.
I think for most of us, it's very hard to imagine a bigger, more expanded, more conscious dimension that's us. We
Mm,
put it outside of us. And
mm,
most
mm.
mystical paths say, wait a minute, it's in here.
Yeah.
And my job is to connect with it and then learn from it. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That was a big something to your question. Did it help?
Mm. Yeah. I mean, what is not to love about everything you say? The way you say it, there's so much clarity. Yeah. So attachment is one of the message that personally it just got to me. It's so letting
Yeah.
go of the attachments we have will enable us to see clearly, to have that
Yes.
broader vision of the situation of it makes
Yeah.
so much sense. So with that in mind, something else you said that caught my attention was free will. So that choosing to stay or to go, or even to
Mhm.
continue to be attached or let go of a situation, is that something that, so do you believe in free will? Do we really have, who is there to make a choice, really? So I wonder, yeah, I hear so many things about, I mean, I follow non-duality, Advaita Vedanta, and there's no self, really. There's no one doing anything. This is a dream of life happening. Um, yeah, so when you say free will, having that choice, I would love to understand your perspective on that, Ragini.
Well, because I am steeped in the paradoxical perspective,
Yeah.
I can only say that it is all an illusion and it is all very real. So
Mm,
there's two dimensions of reality that we're trying to work with. One is a dimension that is illusory in the sense, not that it's not real, but in the sense that it's not permanent. I mean,
right,
that's what
right,
I understand. That's what I understand the teachings to be of Advaita at one level, is that yes, it's illusory, but it's totally real for every aspect of the mind body phenomenon.
mm,
So our job, and then the non-duality, and of course, as soon as you say non-duality, you're back in duality. Because,
yeah,
you know,
yeah, true.
you can't get away from it when you use language at
Yeah,
all. So
true.
if you say there's duality and there's non-duality, or there's duality and then there's something beyond duality, right? That would even be better than non-duality,
Right.
because non
Yeah.
sort of marks it out like it doesn't exist, right? And I
Right.
know for me, one of the big eye openers was what was meant by illusion. It means temporary. It means
Mm,
it's not permanent. That it doesn't mean it's not real in the sense
mm,
of experientially the truth for your body, for your emotional body, for your
right.
mental body. You know, all those things are real. So when you talk about when I talk about free will these days, I think that we do have the freedom to make the choice, to
Yeah,
stay with your scenario, to stay or
yeah,
to go.
right.
Okay. That kind of free will, when my experience, when I've gotten up into the higher things where you want to go up
Yeah,
instead of, insulate yourself in something and change, trying to change the illusion,
right.
right? So that it's all positive with no negativity. That is such a dead end.
Yeah, so true.
If you're going for spiritual stuff, if you're not going for that, it's totally fine. I mean, it's wonderful, right? There's nothing wrong with trying to make the world a better place,
Right,
right?
right. Yeah.
But when it comes down to the issue of free will,
Mhm.
and you're talking spiritually, from my understanding and my experience, you can use your will to make that decision. Do I want to look at this from my personality, ego perspective, or do I want to look at it from a more spiritual perspective? For me, I
Mm,
say, do I want to look at this
mm,
from a dualistic perspective or from a paradoxical perspective, where I'm both, right? I'm the greater
yeah.
and I'm also this little person down here
Mm.
struggling with this ridiculous dramatic scenario
Yeah,
filled with emotional angst and everything else. And oh my God, what's going to happen? And blah, 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 blah. It's all very real to the mind body, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
those people who are meditating and doing the other things to try and calm the mind and bring it to some place where they can find their will
yeah.
and decide to redirect it. Because to
Mm,
me, free will, we have it, and it's up to us how we use it. And if we're
mm,
stuck in duality, we can only use it for this or for that,
yeah,
right?
right.
If we have a paradoxical viewpoint, we can use it to see the scenario from the dualistic perspective,
Yeah,
right? Or seeing duality as one unified whole. You know,
right.
you can't.
Mm,
It's like you can't have a center without a circumference.
right,
You can't have it. You can't find the center or the balance point between happiness and sadness if you don't have happiness and sadness. I mean, it's the only
right,
reason balance makes any sense, right?
right.
So the role of the free will is where the idea of personal responsibility comes in. Where do you want to direct it? So whether I should stay or go in a relationship, and that question is what's plaguing you, or whether it's, do I want to put my attention on making the world a better place, which is totally okay,
Mm.
or finding spirituality and finding God, or third option,
Huh.
both. Help
Mm,
the world be a better place, be a channel, but do it from this place up here that reminds you that this is a beautiful world, but it's really also very awful in many
mm.
ways. And yes, try to make it better, but know that from a dualistic perspective, it's going to go back and forth, but keep trying. but you get your energy to keep going, to get your will directed towards both. When you get so
Mm.
depressed because the world is so awful and certain times so polarized right now, that's what
Yeah.
it's time for.
Yeah.
A lot of time for my work is because it's the polarization. You can't avoid it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So my work is to help people neutralize their own polarization so they can come back to the middle and do their actions in the world, but from a place of greater equanimity, and
Mm.
pointing their will for whatever they do from an awareness of the bigger picture and the little drama going on, and the bigger picture and the
Right.
little drama going on, and
Right.
just going back and forth this way instead
Yeah.
of this way.
Ah. So it's finding elevated. I mean, that's duality again, but we're using language which is
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
mired in duality. Yeah, elevated ways of expression, which I call
yeah.
love, expressions of love,
Mhm.
of kindness, of collaborations and gratitude. Oh, I love that word you use. I mean, the concept of gratitude
Yeah.
is just beautiful. And beauty itself, I mean, beauty, being able to see beauty in this. What comes to mind is that mind of dual mind is how did this happen? How did we come to experience this as an individual? Like we feel like so small, and then we also have the, as you say, we have the option to see from the bigger picture. So how did this happen? From my perspective, I have the Advaita Vedanta again with the cycles of life, the mental let's say baggage that we carry that keeps coming back, the attachments that we have solidified in this realm, and then we keep coming back in new bodies. Is that something that you also talk about when you with your clients, Ragini, or you don't mention mind continuation and reincarnation?
Well, generally, I leave what your spiritual belief set is to you. I I just know that as long as you're in the mind and as long as you are setting up what you like against what you dislike,
Mm,
no matter what you're doing, it's not going to get you where you want to go if you have your sights set on freedom
right,
from the mind. Now, not everybody they're not interested in having
right,
freedom from the mind, and that's
true.
fine. Maybe they just want freedom from their partner or freedom from the urge for food. But
Yes.
essentially, it's all the same thing. Part of it is understanding that that you have the will, and will comes from that which is animating you. It's something that's gifted
Mm,
to us. We have it, right? Why life works this way? The
mm.
only thing I could say is it's easiest to navigate it
Yeah.
if you look at it as a classroom. You
Ah,
know, every
yeah.
level of our educational system gives you more to learn, handle, and be responsible for, from kindergarten up to your PhD, right? And
Mm,
every level keeps expanding the picture and expanding the picture and
right.
expanding the picture and getting
Mm,
more complicated,
right.
right? And
Yeah.
it requires more thought and more all kinds of
Mm,
things. And what's the opposite of complicated? Simple.
yeah.
What's the
Yeah.
opposite of hard? Easy.
Mm,
So, a lot of spiritual paths talk about effortless effort,
yeah.
which is a
Yeah.
paradoxical thing where you're making the effort,
Yeah.
but you're making it because you're taking your will and putting it out there to start something. And then you turn it over and you let the supposed thing called God or whatever it is you prefer want to call it, whatever's animating you alive, you say, okay, now you help. So it's like one of the things that a lot of my teachers have used is the two birds of a wing, two birds, two wings of a bird,
Yeah.
that the bird can't fly unless both wings are flapping away. So one is you, which has a lot to do with your will to surrender the attachment,
Mm,
right? And the other is to get your guidance from whatever this other thing is. And I just hesitate to give it a name because
yeah.
everybody has their own way of thinking about it. And that's
Right.
personal. I mean,
Right.
everybody's journey is theirs. So, and I,
Yeah.
I trust that. Uh, so
Mm,
I don't know. Free will is important, but most of us have, if we think free will just means I can choose the one I like over the one I don't like.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's not going to get you freedom,
Mm.
to
Yeah.
feel. It's not
Yeah.
going to get you happiness.
Yeah.
And it's going to get you in more trouble than it's actually worth.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this is how the brain and the mind is organized. So part of my work is helping to generate a new neural pathway in the brain that says I can allow life to be both positive and
Mm.
negative, and
Right.
understand that's one. You want to find unity. A lot of people who are on spiritual paths want to find unity.
Yeah.
For me, the closest place to find it in a way that it can impact us is to understand that opposites are one unified whole.
Mm.
As you find it right
Yeah.
in front of us with the right perspective. Happiness and sadness is one unified whole. You will never get one and not have the other. Not on
Ah.
this plane. Other planes,
Ah.
yes, not on this one.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So, not on this plane. So, do you have, is that some people they speak of different planes, like the spiritual plane,
mhm,
where we can experience non-duality?
mhm.
Is that something that is an experience we can have in the human body, Ragini, from your understanding?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, yes.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yes, indeed. But there's different planes. Like we're living in minimally four planes every day: the physical plane, the emotional plane, the
Yeah.
mental plane. And within the mental plane is the visual aspect, the auditory aspect. I mean, we live in different levels. And one of the things we don't really get is that we are multidimensional in that
Mm.
sense. We have different bodies. It's not just
Yeah.
this body, it's an emotional
Right.
body. And the spiritual body is the one that it has a deeper inroad to the biggest picture,
Yeah.
right? Because the mind doesn't even
Mm.
care about the big picture, actually.
Right.
It
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
wants to get rid of the opposite that's making the big picture not look so good,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Right. True.
Or the emotional state that makes it, life is
Um,
perfect. I mean, I have clients I work with and they come in and the
yeah.
core issue is life. I should be happy 24/7. That's what life should be.
Ah,
I mean,
yeah.
I seriously have many clients where that is what they come in with and they're devastated because life is not
Ah,
happy.
right.
Well, life isn't going to be
Mm.
happy, but that doesn't mean you can't be happy.
Yeah.
If you can, I find that when you embrace a paradoxical mindset, which is based on mystic psychology, by the way, um, that the opportunity to be happy is there. It's for happiness for no reason at all. You're just like
Yeah.
life
Yeah.
is life is good, which doesn't mean there's nothing bad in it.
Mm.
It's just life is beautiful. It's wonderful because it's whole. It's
Yeah.
one unified thing expressing itself back and forth. So my work is all about helping people become more conscious
Yeah.
by using their will, by learning to detach and discriminate and seeing opposites as one unified whole. We keep looking for unity out there and it's
Yeah.
sitting right here
Yeah.
in the way we're perceiving what life brings us.
Mm. Wow. Yes, a trillion times to that. And I can,
I hope I'm
um,
I hope I'm making sense. I'm just
yeah,
chattering on here trying to share my answers to your questions are just blah.
and I
So I
love
hope it's
that you,
helpful.
yeah, you just talked about earlier about not too much thinking, but just being in the moment and expressing what we know to be
Mhm.
true. It's coming from, yeah, that place that doesn't require thinking. So I actually love that, Ragini. Thank you for being open
Mhm.
to life. So you are a transformational leader coach, behavior change specialist, author, of course, and consciousness mindfulness mentor.
Mhm.
How did you come to this point? Is that I know we talked about your story on a different interview, but I would love for you briefly to let the audience know of how you got to do what you do today and be who you are today.
The honest answer is I haven't a clue how I got here.
Yeah.
I really don't have any idea. Just following where life was leading me and asking me to do certain things. It felt like, how we always talk about
Yeah.
following a pull. somewhere. So doing that kind of thing. But have always wanted to be happy. This is the little story I think you want me to tell.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to be happy, and I had never been happy, right?
Yeah.
Which was ridiculous because I was not come from a very wealthy family, but a middle class family. I mean, my God, I had everything that you could possibly have, right?
Yeah.
Not as much as other people had, but certainly enough. I do not have a sad story about my life, right?
Yeah.
However, I was very unhappy. So, of course, I moved eventually into meditation and mindfulness and learning about the mind and the brain. But I was at an ashram in India one day, and I was sitting on the wall outside the ashram, and kind of like saying, okay, here I am in one of the most apparently blessed places on the planet for spirituality, right? And I'm such a mess, and I'm still not happy. And yeah, it's cool here and everything, but
Yeah.
I just don't get it. I don't get it. So I'm sitting there, and this guy who was a beggar, who I'd seen in the streets many times, he's coming up to me, and he's got his hands out begging for alms, like they do
Yeah.
in India.
Yeah.
And he has no teeth. He is ragged clothes, no shoes on his feet, and he is smiling with this
Yeah.
beautiful light sort of coming out of his eyes.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at him and going, what the?
Yeah.
How could he be happy? How could he be happy with these demeaning circumstances that he is
Yeah.
in? Right. And in that moment, as I watched him and I really saw he was not at all disturbed by his external conditions. I mean, he wasn't. There was no ripple of despair or discomfort or anything coming out of him at that moment in time.
Yeah.
And I had a big insight, a big awakening. And that was my definition of happiness, was the complete and total absence of unhappiness.
Ah.
And I went,
Mm.
wow, I had no ability to be happy in the
Mm.
presence of something that made me feel unhappy, that
Right.
made me think something bad about myself, that made me speak to myself in a tone of voice that was not loving at all. None of that was acceptable. And as long as it was there, I was going to be unhappy.
Right.
So that changed everything on that day. It became aware to me, okay, obviously happiness then means you have to be able to accept everything that makes you unhappy.
Yeah.
That was my basic premise. And I started getting messages to just look at opposites, understand this, and get it. Because once you understand opposites, well, then you can be happy no matter what happens, right?
Mm.
Because if you're fat,
Yeah.
you'll eventually get thin. If you're alive, you'll eventually die. If you've been
Mm.
rejected, you'll eventually be accepted. Maybe not that
Mm.
person by that person, but
Mm.
somewhere in your life there will be acceptance, right?
Yeah.
So I just started exploring all
Well,
that. And that took me through all the things that you described that I
ri
do for a living now.
right. So it's, temporary, everything that's happening here. I love the way you said that. So illusion, yeah, the definition of illusion, the way you understand is just that's temporary. It's changing.
It's
Everything will
temporary.
change. Right. Yeah, that's some of the teachings or the wisdom that I really hold on to in moments of difficulties. It
Yeah.
will pass. It will pass.
Yes, it will pass.
Yeah, in that sense of equanimity and calm just sets in. It's incredible how fast it happens too. It's really, really
Yes.
fast. So let's see. I love in your book, The Jewels of Here and Now. There is one poem that caught my attention more than any other for some reason. It's titled
Uh-huh.
My Longing to Be Still. Do you
Uh-huh.
have that in front of you, Raga? I would love for you to read
Yeah.
that, please. I should have had the
Yeah.
page.
Yes. Sure. This is the picture that goes with the poem. If you can see
Yeah,
it there. Can you see it?
yeah, yeah.
It's a
The
nice picture
trees.
of the
Yeah,
woods and things.
yes.
Okay. The poem says, or the musing is, my longing to be still and just rest calls to me more often these days. The forest's silent aliveness entices me to simply sit down and do nothing for a while. I enjoy this activity of stillness more than seems reasonably possible. Perhaps nature is instructing me once again how to enjoy the vastness of life's small moments.
Yeah. So, and I wondered why this really caught my attention so profoundly. And I
Mhm.
have anything that has to do with silence, has to do with nature. It really kind of resonates deeply with me. So your words
Mhm.
just stayed. So the
Nice.
question is the longing to be still a calling for all of us?
I would absolutely say yes. Now, are we so busy that we could are we too busy to hear it? More often than not, yes.
Right.
Plus, our entire culture is not designed to support stillness, but it is a polarity, moving stillness.
Yeah.
The call to stillness is for me the call from what is animating me alive in a way to come home. Be still, come home. This movement thing. This is life on this plane. This is not the ultimate reality. This constant
Mm.
moving back and forth and back and forth and striving and struggling. And that's what most of our lives are composed of. So when we do give ourselves the space to be still, it can be so nourishing,
Yeah.
right? When we really can. And I think it's because it answers the call that's
Yeah.
there. It
Yeah.
answers the call. And that call, I would I would encourage people to follow that call. It's the one thing that's not coming from your mind for sure. Because
Ah, yes.
your mind just wants to move. It doesn't
Yes.
like stillness at all.
Ah, wow. So
That's why
that's
meditation is so hard.
right. So that's a very good, let's say, way of knowing, right, Ragini,
Mhm,
when the
mhm.
difference between the mind realm and consciousness, that broader picture of life, that space, that's timeless and spaceless place. There's not a place really, but that's how we know. It's because there is this desire to be still, but it's already still. Actually, that's what I wonder. Because, as you said about wholeness, we're already whole. There's nothing that's not whole here. But the paradox is that it is still, but it feels like it's moving. So for me has been finding stillness, finding stillness in movement. So being calm no matter what. It's almost like what you said, being happy no matter what, or being happy for no reason. That's coming from that place.
Yeah.
Mm. So let's see. There's another. There's so many other passages in your book that caught my attention. You divide the book actually into different titles: Whispers of Joy. There's a beautiful one where you say, "When a flower's beauty." That's the title. And the phrase that caught
Mhm.
my attention was, "I feel better when I forget about performing and instead dive into my heart."
Yeah.
And that goes back to that movement, isn't it? Like this urge to move all the time, to become something that we already are. So I would love to hear from you a bit more about the inspiration for this poem, When a Flower's Beauty.
Should I read it for people
Yes,
first?
please. Yes.
Okay, it's short. When a flower's beauty is a real showstopper, it is obvious, even to the uninitiated eye. I wish I believed my beauty could stop the show, but
Mhm.
all I usually see are flaws. I feel better when I forget about performing and instead dive into my heart. That's when my unquestionable beauty becomes free to just run hog wild.
Yeah. That it is joyful, isn't it? It kind of inspires.
Yeah, it
Uh,
is.
the-
It's really funny because, once you can get the paradox mindset, you get your mind wired around this idea that two seemingly opposing things can happen at the same time, right? That you can be still and in the midst of moving, and you can be moving in the midst of stillness.
yeah.
Right now, most of us have them as two opposing things, and they cannot exist in the same moment. And that is simply not true. They can, and they do. But you have to have the right perspective. It's not right in the sense of another being wrong, but the the perspective that lets you see it correctly.
Yeah.
Okay, from that lens, right? You put on a different. This is my pair of glasses, my paradox glasses, right?
Yeah.
And then I don't have any of my other glasses here, but I have to take these off and put on a different pair, and I can see, oh my God, these things are so opposing. I mean, I don't want this one, I want that one. And then I have to take off those glasses and put these back on, and I go, oh, wait a minute. This is life. This is wholeness. This is what I'm searching for, wholeness, unification. It's right here in front of my eyes, and I can't see it. Once I can see it, which is a perspective, right? Then it's like, well, I can be moving and connect with the stillness that's there behind the movement. And when I'm in stillness, I can still be moving. And so
Yes.
when that becomes like obvious and not it doesn't cause you to go, okay, I've got to do this in order to move, and I got to do that in order to be still. It's so relaxing to just go, oh.
Yeah.
And something it gives you a real freedom to let life be what it's being in that moment, which is seemingly contradictory.
Yeah.
What it actually is one unified whole in motion.
Yeah.
Also, because it only happens, I mean, really, if we talk about the jewels of here and now, there's only now.
Yeah.
Past and future is the domain of the mind. The now is the domain of that which animates us. And that's where we're trying to get to connect with that. And that's where stillness and motion become deep friends, like lovers. You can't separate them. And why would you try? It's such a beautiful experience to be in motion and still at the same time.
Right.
But you got to have that paradox head mindset to be able to get that. And that takes a little bit of work because the mind doesn't like it.
Yes, right. So it takes practice, as you said. Wow, I mean, it resonates true. And it's the teachings that I follow for so long now, and
Yeah.
it just makes so much sense. The now it's what happens, but then I love the way you say that, the paradoxical mindset, because that's what it
Mhm.
takes to see. Some teachers believe also that it's possible to be happy all the time, like blissful, that eternal bliss to coexist or exist here now forever, per se. And we have
Mhm.
seen some of these. They call ascended masters. We have seen some of them on Earth, and probably they are now in human bodies still. That always blissful and always in the realm, although they are still relating with this duality, with this
Mhm.
illusion. So I wonder how is that something that is that free will? They took that call and they kind of chose to live a life, to live this human experience in a way where they are more in touch with that pure vision of life, the eternal of this, the wholeness, although everything is whole. But I wonder what is the difference, Ragini, for example, between those spiritual teachers that I have had access to, that I talked to, that they are already enlightened, that they already have not just understood, but realized what you have been
Mhm.
explaining and talking about here. But what is, how come there's this other kinds of teachers that they seem to embody almost completely the consciousness, pure consciousness, and just live from that place? Would you say that that's fear, that they lost all sense of fear, that they have surrendered completely the, let's say, paradoxical mind, and of course the regular mind, the mind that navigates this reality with all the functions?
Well, I don't know what those teachers think or do, but and I wouldn't, try to make a comment about what they're doing or not doing. However, I do want to say that at a certain point, using a paradox mindset suddenly becomes you just see that everything is one whole thing.
Mm, yeah.
And that's the only thing that changes. And that changes everything.
Mm.
Right. I mean, I think it's probably way more, obviously, it's way more complicated than I'm simplifying
Yeah.
here in this little
Yeah.
conversation. And there's far more that I don't. I think anyone who thinks that they've stopped
Yeah.
exploring what consciousness is
Yeah.
is probably needs to keep looking, because I don't think it ever stops. I mean, the closest thing that I use in my journey of understanding the divine is the creative force, the force of
Mhm.
creation that never stops creating. Life never stops creating. It's always creating something new in
Right.
some way, some new form, some new. I mean, there's way too much creativity that
Yeah.
shows
True.
from taking whatever it is that's formless and putting it into form. And that's where we have a lot of say. But I do think the way that these kinds of people get where they're going is through one simple thing: practice
Yeah.
being the most important, discipline,
Mhm.
concentration. Those are the most important elements, which I'm sure your teachers say as well. You have to concentrate, you have to focus, and keep learning, but you do have to practice. I mean, you can't get anywhere here if you're not practicing, and practicing translates into discipline. And then discipline means that you have the power to use your creativity, to use your personal life force to create a happier life. I mean,
Mm.
if you knew, for example, to
Yeah.
get back to your original question, if you
Yeah.
knew for a fact, and when you looked in the mirror every morning, you knew that you saw perfection, you knew that you saw wholeness, and there was no ego in it. It was simply a statement of fact. There was no conflict in the sense of, there was no conflict. There was pushes and pulls, but there was no conflict in
Right.
it. It was simply a dance. You know, when you dance with somebody
Mm.
in a certain thing, there's pushing and pulling, right?
Right.
But there's a dance happening. If you got up every morning and you looked in the mirror and that's what you saw, wouldn't you be happy and blissful no matter what?
Yeah. True.
I mean, I think that's a kind of an
Mm.
interesting way to look at it.
Mm.
That's
Mm.
what we're liking. But with these people who are saying they're happy and centered, forever and then never changes, they've
Yeah.
done a lot of work to get there. But they
Uh-huh.
also they're seeing life in a different way, which we can
Uh-huh.
all learn. We can learn. We're on a journey. Some people aren't interested in this, and that's fine. You obviously are, which is why I love talking to you,
Yes.
because I'm interested in it too.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's fine that other people aren't. I mean, some people just
Mm.
aren't interested in this at all, and that's fine.
Right.
Everybody's on their own journey. That's sort of where I am with it. But so
Right.
those guys, those people, there's a way to be happy no matter what.
Mm.
Everybody has to find their way to start moving themselves towards that. And eventually, this is my experience, life reaches and says, "Oh, okay,
Mm.
let me help."
Yeah.
And however that happens, you want to see
Mm.
it and be present for it and say, "Thank you." And I accept the help. And then you can do the next step, and then you'll get some more help. So it's just about what you want.
Right, right. That sincere desire, right, to get
Yeah.
there in a sense of seeing the truth. I want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier about trust and faith um,
Mhm.
on this journey. Trust has been like one of the biggest elements for me. Every time I
Okay.
see anything that's a contradiction, the paradox, then I immediately go to trust. I have to trust what's happening, what I see, what's happening now. But you also mentioned faith. That's something that a word that I usually don't use for some reason. Who knows why? But what is the difference between trust and faith from your perspective, Ragini?
Well, from my perspective, neither one of them have much meaning at all unless you have a conviction to
Mm.
put your trust in and your faith in. So there has to be some kind of conviction that you're operating out of and taking a stance on,
Mm.
whether it's an intellectual conviction or a conviction based on an experience that a person has had that spoke to them in some way. So in my journey, my conviction over time has grown that there is really something other than my personality and ego, and that it is actually the same as me. And one of the things that helped me with that was looking at a tried and true old analogy of taking gold and making it into 1,000 different forms, all still made of gold. Some may be, nicked and scratched and weird forms and everything else, and others can be gorgeous and beautiful, but they're all made of gold.
Right.
So my conviction grew over time that there was something at the base of it all. And I was on the path of, using alchemy in a way. How do you change base metal into gold, right?
Yeah.
Um, so conviction had to be there first for me to get past my cynicism that this was all a crock, and New Age and Advaita and everything else was just a crock, and to get past that so that I could take the next step. Some kind of conviction that helped me was necessary. And for me, it's that, oh, I was wrong. This is real. There's something.
Yeah.
But then I have to believe in that. I had to believe in it somewhere. And a belief is strong, as we all know in the human process. Beliefs sort
Yeah.
of really, they're like in the engine of the train, where whatever you believe, that's where your train is going, no matter
Yeah.
what you want to do.
Yeah.
So then I had to look at, well, do I really believe this? And that's kind of coming back to, is my brain and my body and my unconscious
Mm.
mind, are they all saying, okay, this is the truth? And that's when we usually forget that a belief is not a truth.
Yeah.
But in some ways, it becomes a truth when you put a lot of energy into it.
Yeah.
So then for me, it would be a belief, and then I would have to trust my belief and trust the path that was taken to get me there. And then it was to have faith in the whole process,
Mm.
that I was being guided in some way. I mean, there's a lot of faith. There's a lot of things you
Right.
have to make decisions about. You have to use your free will in a certain direction, right, that
Yeah.
you want.
Yeah.
And that's so in that way, those four things kind of relate: conviction, belief, trust, and for me, faith. And of course, doubt is going to be in there. Faith is doubt. Trust is, cynicism or whatever. And,
Yeah.
belief is, so the paradox thing still applies in all of that. But yeah, so that's been my experience. It may not be anybody else's, but it was mine, and it's been helpful. And I've seen it work in other people as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense. So it is a process, like everything seems to be here, a natural process when it
Yeah.
comes to finding truth. Let's see, we're
Yeah.
almost at the end. I have so many other notes here about your beautiful book. Let me see. There's something else that you mentioned that really caught my attention. It's glimpses of grandeur. That's the section. You said, "What must be like?" That's the title, I believe. Yes, and then you say, "To what must be like to be so relaxed that
Mhm.
you are willing to be vulnerable?" That's a question. I
Mhm.
would love for you to read that one too, Ragini, please.
Okay. I like this one. Before we got on today, I picked out the poem in this book that I would be most loving to read, and this was the one I picked.
Interesting. Coincidence? I don't know.
So here's the picture that's with
Yeah.
this one. Can you see that? That's a sweet
Yes.
picture.
So
Okay.
cute. Yeah.
So here's the musing. What must it be like to be so relaxed that you're willing to be vulnerable? No thought for your surroundings or whether you'll achieve the desired approval of those around you. It must be sweet and filled with a delightful freedom. That's where I'm headed. Not sure when I'll set up housekeeping there, but miraculously, I somehow scored a daily visitor's pass. Accident or kismet? Think I'll go with good fortune and
Mm.
just enjoy.
Yeah, and just enjoy, right.
And
So
just enjoy.
that the word freedom again, the concept, the idea of freedom. When I think
Mhm.
about freedom, I think about exactly about that, relaxation, just the
Yeah.
uh, you mentioned faith. I usually don't use the word faith because it's connected with not blindly believing something. But
Yeah.
it seems like that's the way to go. We can't really see. We cannot see it all. We don't know it all. So it is having faith and relaxing and knowing that it might not be okay, but it will pass. It will pass. Hmm. So yeah,
Yeah.
I want to make.
I was just going to say it might not be okay, but the opposite of that is that it is okay. And it was done exactly for you to give you a certain gift,
Mm,
right? So to say, when you hear yourself say it's not okay,
yeah.
so I'll just have to, I would, stop for a minute and go, well, what's the opposite of that? What if it were okay?
Mm,
Right? Because that's the way we have the power to make it okay or not okay. Right. And so, because we're not enlightened yet, we don't know what we're doing here. The
right.
paradox mindset is very helpful because you just go from choosing one over the other to embracing both.
Right.
And that changes
Yeah.
everything within your entire system. It's like a little shuffle happens.
Yeah.
I look at the world and I think, my God, it's gonna go one way and it may not be the way I want it to go. And so, I get all tense and I start like this, and then I go, well, wait a minute. And I go, it's both, right? It can
Yeah.
go one way or the other way, but it's always going to be going some way.
Yeah.
So what happens when you can get that bigger perspective is you get calmed down. And that's what I'm talking about, having
Mm.
faith in at this level, even if you've never had any experience touching something beyond the mind, just being able to shift your perspective that calms you down is beautiful. I mean, it
Mm.
really helps to
Mm.
navigate the world, especially today.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ragini. I love your
You are very
intention.
welcome.
Yeah. I mean, I love everything about it because it sounds true and it feels true. So it must be. It must be. I know we're all looking for truth here, but it really feels like it. Yeah, the paradox mind. Yeah, that just resonates so true to me.
Let me just
Being
say that one of my teachers has said to me, when you really become a mystic, paradox disappears. There's no paradox, there's no contradiction, there's nothing. Everything is perfectly unfolding as it should, just like a
Mm,
rose unfolds perfectly as it should, with each petal releasing its tension in just the right time, in just the right ways. It harmonizes with the environment and it goes, oh, it's my season, right? I'm going to open now. No problem.
yeah.
That's where that happiness comes from. It's
Mm,
just letting things be and knowing, right? Trusting, believing, getting convinced that it's all perfectly being handled. I know that sounds idiotic to the mind. I mean, sometimes I walk around and I say, oh my God, I sound like the people I think are nuts, right? But what to do? Changes happen to us all, and we get to a different place.
right.
Thank
And
you for having me.
thank you. Thank you so much, Ragini. I do have a final question for you. Oh, you said that actually you answered that question already beautifully, but I'll ask you again, just in case. And then I have a technical question. So if there's one message only that you wish everyone to take with them from this conversation, what would that be?
It would be contemplating this little phrase from Nisargadatta, who's an Indian mystic who is not with us anymore. And the little phrase is, love tells me I'm everything. Wisdom tells me I'm nothing. Between these two, my life flows.
Yeah. Yes. What can I say? Thank you so much
It's
again.
beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful.
Thank
And
you.
it's, again, it resonates true, whatever truth is for me, right? For all of us, we have different perspectives of what truth is. It just sounds true. And I want to thank you again. And I would love to meet you again, of course, for different events. Who knows, and meet you in person one day. But
Yeah.
before that,
Yeah.
for now, where can we find more information about your work, your books, and events, future projects, Ragini?
Okay. Well, you can find my 5 books on Amazon. Just go to Ragini Elizabeth Michaels and you'll find The Jewels of Here and Now, Musings of the Marketplace Mystic, the Wildly Quiet Presence of God, I think is another one. And then there's a book called Lions in Wait, and then my major book, Unflappable, 6 Steps to Staying Happy, Centered, and Peaceful, no matter what.
No matter what,
So
right? That's the key.
you can find the books on Amazon, and then my website is raginimichaels.com, Ragini Michaels.com. There is on that site, you can get access to a 4 video mini course for the big centered, no matter what course that I have online. It's an online Zoom course at this point with me involved. So it's not just an off the shelf video thing. And so you can go to my website at raginimichaels.com and you can get access to that. Yes, you give me your email, and that gives me permission to send you other emails, and you can always unsubscribe, of course. It's about an hour long, 4 videos. And I think that will give you more about the paradoxical mindset. There's also a place on that page to set up a complimentary conversation with me for 30 minutes to talk about whatever it is, whether it's a private session you want to do, or take one of the courses, or relate to the one you talk about, the book or something like that. So 30-minute complimentary call is there for you can do that. You can also check me out on LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever those other things are, social
Okay.
media stuff. I got somebody who puts up quotes all
Yeah.
the time for me that I find. So they're pretty, they're nice too. So those are the ways that you can find me, and you can always give me a call and set up a time, and I'd be happy to talk with you and answer any questions that anybody has about the work and how to
Wonderful.
get more material about it.
Yes. Thank you so much again for your presence, Ragini. And we'll talk soon. We'll
Thank
be in
you,
touch again.
Valeria.
Thank you.
Thank you
But
for the work you do. It's very beautiful. Thank you very
thank
much.
thank you for your
Okay.
presence. Bye for now.